I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, July 10th, 2024 meeting of the Tenino Planning Commission. Let the record show that all commissioners are present. Let's take a look at the agenda here. Already we have one change. Adam's going to give us a city council report. He is our council liaison.
Let's go again once.
Yes. Maybe we should just keep it there.
Yeah,
Like make a permanent change of having that.
yeah.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. So let's take a look at the agenda with that one change. See if there are any others.
I motion to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
With that change.
With that change.
With the change.
Yes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we got some minutes from last meeting. Nellie wasn't here.
I move to approve the minutes. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Oh,
Huh?
I said aye. I thought both.
Okay, there's no members of the public here, so let's go to the city council liaison report.
Awesome.
Excellent.
Okay. I'm gonna move this just a little closer. Okay, so I attended the June 25th. That's the okay. So June 25th was the last council meeting I went to. So let's see. Or no, wait. Sorry, that was our. My date's wrong. Anyway, so I was asked a couple of questions. Number one was about the expansion that we're thinking about recommending, specifically in regards to Mima Acres. I was asked how that was going to happen, and they were talking about, if we were going to send a letter. So specifically, they were asking if we were going to send a letter to the property owners ahead of time and say, hey, this is our intention. Do we plan, or how do you feel about being included into the UGA, or something along those lines, which I thought was a good idea. Probably is to send a letter once we have things finalized, and then asking for comments. Additionally, I was asked where the water was coming from to do the expansion that we are proposing, and what are we going to do as a planning commission if we do not have the water to supply to any new homes that would be built if an expansion were to take place.
Okay.
So, just to let you know, those are the main questions that I was getting.
Okay.
And then, finally, was the city council asked to be updated as we approve or as we finish sections of the comprehensive plan, so that they can get an idea of kind of what we're working on, and some of the how things are shaping up as we go along.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. We already kind of talked about that, but does anybody want to discuss either of those questions any further?
I think I would just add that when it comes to the water rights, this is a very big theoretical exercise. We can't predict what's going to happen in a year, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years from now. We just have to comply with the state mandates, and that really drives why we're looking at different expansions or different zoning changes, and lack of water will be something that can hinder development, but it's not necessarily something that we have any control over, and really at the end of the day, the council is the one that would have to make those decisions when it comes to water rights. and I think that's kind of out of our purview.
I think the council would benefit from like a GMA training course, just so they understand what we're doing with the comp plan and what our actions could lead to or don't lead to. You know, why are we doing this? It's not like we're just trying to blindly expand the city like recklessly, or you know, without going through the proper steps. You know, in a lot of ways we don't have any choice in some of these things, and so if they understood that, maybe they wouldn't ask, you know, where we're gonna get what is the planning commission gonna do about the water. By the time we get to that point, we'll probably be working on the comp plan for 20 years in the future, so we won't even be thinking about the water at that time. But that's not our job. So
Well, I think when it comes to the inclusion of the climate, what is it called?
The climate element?
Yeah, the climate element. Like, water will be a concept in that, along with all of the other things, but really we don't have the policy to change that, and really, like, at the end of the day, water will be either scarce or plentiful in the future, and we can't decide how to shape the future without that knowledge anyway.
water issue will be addressed at the time the development is proposed to occur, if it's not addressed before that, right? I mean, essentially. Hopefully the council will be working on a plan to find out if there is water available, or to procure some water rights from some local person if they're available. Discussions with ecology. I mean, those are the things that should probably be happening. Okay. Anything else on those?
Oh, I have a question
Yes.
myself. The council indicated that they want updates on how the comprehensive plan is going, as opposed to, you know, a draft at a later date. Did they indicate if they want those updates to be done by members of the planning commission or by us?
No, I think it was just a general, can we get an update?
Okay.
I think it has to come from you guys in some ways.
My
Yeah.
understanding was a presentation by SJ Alliance
Gotcha.
to be provided, just to make sure it's
Mm-hmm.
clean cut and exactly what is proposed.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I would also say though, that part of the comp plan is presenting after we've actually done the work. So I wouldn't necessarily say that we should count the chickens before they're hatched in a way too. Like, we shouldn't present too much that then is going to be changed, or they're going to then provide their input. Because I think part of the overall conversation is reminding how the process works. The planning commission is just that advisory body that presents something, and then at the end the council has the option to amend, accept, ultimately deny the whole thing. So I think we also don't necessarily want to get too far in that then they're giving us their feedback before we have had the ability to do our advising.
True.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it's something that I see come up in other places that are also doing their work, is that they're getting a lot of direct input from city council before they've had a chance to really finish their recommendations, and it can be a little confusing, I think, or it can be a little bit leading for the planning commission, in that they feel a little bit forced into a specific direction.
Could take you guys a lot longer to do it if you're getting like a billion little comments. I would think while you're doing it as well.
That also happens. Yes.
Okay. Nice. Okay. Did you want to make a comment? We passed the public comment period. We good?
This is my buddy.
Oh, okay. Excellent.
Welcome to tonight.
Yes. All right. Moving on. No public hearing. Comprehensive plan update under unfinished business. let's carry on.
Okay, so here we are, July 10th, talking about the comp plan update. I have brought back some of the information that we talked about last time. So here to, I think, what I'm hoping comes from today is that we're pretty well set on our preferred options.
Just because you talk very quietly.
I'm sorry. What I'm hoping to come from today is enough information that we're in agreement on enough information to be able to start making some policy recommendations in the land use and housing elements to come back to you in August. So that means that we're going to be talking once more about infill development. We're going to talk about non-residential capacity. We're going to talk about opportunity sites, and we're going to revisit the discussion about anti-displacement with some actions that we can consider. All right, so I'll just start with some background information, a little refresher. So we're planning to accommodate 231 units, which closes the deficits noted here in the moderate and higher income categories for our 2045 housing unit allocations. We do have a small surplus of lower income units, but we do need to be planning ahead. I'm sorry, my math was wrong on the previous slide. We do need to be planning ahead for that 198 moderate income units and 43 higher income units. We also, in the plan, do need to consider where and how permanent supportive housing and emergency housing could be accommodated within the city. We'll remind everyone that there's no penalty if development doesn't materialize according to the allocations that have been provided, or if development exceeds those allocations. There's no penalty. Our charge is to accommodate these allocations somewhere in the city and urban growth area. We discussed last time a two-pronged approach. So that includes a modest expansion to the urban growth area, as well as looking for opportunities for infill development within the city's current boundaries. Mima Acres is proposed as our preferred expansion alternative, and I have gotten a response from Thurston County, and we're looking to schedule a meeting next week to go over that expansion, and hopefully we will all be on the same page with the city as well as the county for our comp plans going forward. And then we've talked about allowing certain kinds of middle housing by right as a preferred approach to infill development. So talking a little bit more about infill development, I wanted to bring some information on ADU capacity. This is something that came up last time. So as you might remember, cities in Washington need to allow up to 2 ADUs per residential lot in zoning districts that allow for single-family homes, and specifically that has to be allowed on lots that meet minimum lot size requirements for that primary single-family residence. Looking at the conforming lots in zones that allow a single-family residence, we have a total capacity of just over 1,300 ADUs potentially. Most likely, we're going to be seeing a handful of ADUs per year, so a tiny fraction of this, but technically there is quite a lot of capacity available within the city. It's just not likely to materialize that way. There are definitely some challenges in terms of the cost of construction right now that makes it really difficult for a property owner to finance something like that. So these tend to develop fairly slowly. New development, new home builders, especially those in the luxury market, are starting to build units, a single family unit that has a detached or attached ADU, kind of as a spec situation, but those are, I've typically seen those more in like the King County area. I saw a lot of them kind of in the Seattle metro area. I'm not sure what the market for that kind of development would look like down here. So to give you an idea of what the capacity is, we're talking 1,300. Likely we're gonna see 5 a year is maybe what I'm seeing in some similar places, more or less, which would put us at like 100 units over the 20-year planning horizon. So something much more modest. Obviously, there's no way to know for sure exactly what's going to happen, but that would be more in line with what I would expect. These are the other preferred middle housing types that we discussed for infill, and we talked about where those could end up. So this is currently the allowed uses table, and we talked about making some changes to allow ADUs by right consistent with new state laws, and then to expand where duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, courtyard apartments, cottage courts, townhouses, and multiplexes, which are kind of like the step below in a traditional apartment building, where those things might be allowed. This is what I presented last time. I haven't made any changes, but I did want to offer this again in case anybody had any further thoughts to add to our discussion last time. If not, we'll go ahead and take this as kind of the policy direction. We're going to be putting some policies in place that would then allow us to make this kind of change as our implementation action. Keeping in mind, of course, that there will be plenty of opportunity to rethink and revise this as the process continues. But as a first or second touch on this expansion of potential infill options.
Can you go back and remind me what a cottage court is?
Yeah. So cottage court. This can't see.
The bottom, the left.
Yeah. Zoom in on this. So this is a communal development type in which the units look like small detached single-family homes. The units are individually owned, but they share a common open space. In this image, it's this central green space that is a communal yard essentially for those units, and everybody has a very small amount of private space. This is the landscaping associated with their specific unit. They may or may not have parking on site. The units are typically oriented around that common space, so they may or may not face the street or have a significant frontage along the public street, but they're interesting little development because they do provide that kind of detached opportunity, ownership opportunity versus a condo type development. These can also be really effective in environmentally sensitive areas, places with like wetlands or streams, because you can cluster these smaller units all together on the unencumbered portion of the property. So it can be pretty cool from that perspective.
The ownership on these, is that usually just the building only, and then some kind of homeowners association owns all the land, or does that work?
It can be like a unit lot ownership, or just typically not walls in like a condo, but you would own essentially the land under your immediate footprint, and then the HOA would own the rest. Or it might be slightly larger if there is some private open space associated with the unit.
Thank you.
Yeah. And because they can be really effective in those environmentally sensitive areas, that's why I noted them as a potential administrative use in the SFES zone. They can be a really nice way to fit some environmentally sensitive development in where we've got critical areas.
And ADUs are required to be available in that area, the SFUs?
Yes, so ADUs have to be allowed where single-family residential uses are allowed.
Gotcha.
They don't get a pass on complying with all of the other development regulations in place.
So they couldn't build in it like
Yeah.
a wetland?
Yeah, they can't just build in a buffer because an ADU is allowed there. They still need to respect the buffer and all of the rest of the limitations for development on a property, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions on infill, middle housing?
I just have a question.
Yeah.
So for like consistency with the what is that word? Hold on a second. I just lost it. So I guess what's the difference between C2 and C3 that some of them would be administrative and others would be uses allowed outright?
So C2 is, I think this is the one that's more
Was supposed to be,
auto-oriented.
kind of like the gateways to the community
Yeah.
is the concept where most of the businesses would be driven to.
Yeah, it's really more focused on commercial development, whereas C3 is primarily mixed use transition between more intense commercial and residential. So that's why I put the courtyard apartment and the multiplex in as allowable outright. They're
Good.
higher
'Cause it's
density,
supposed to be
typically a
that
bigger
mixture.
building. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We want a mix of commercial
Yeah.
and residential in C3.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Are all of those multifamily housing types, were those already allowed in C2 previously? They always been that way?
Yes, allowed with an administrative
administrative.
use permit, so it's a discretionary permit type. Conditions of approval can be associated
C1
with
as well?
it.
Those were
Yeah.
already,
Yeah, so the only this is what's currently allowed.
um,
So the ones in red are the changes that I've made. So I didn't make any changes to the current
Okay.
C1 or C2 uses, and I'm only recommending adding the more dense types, the two more dense types of middle housing as allowable. And those could be allowable as an administrative use permit, similar to the rest of the housing options in the C3. We can talk about that more when we start working on development regulations. We don't need to make that kind of decision right now, mostly trying to get a flavor of does this approach for allowing things outright, allowing these specific types of middle housing feel appropriate in these areas? Are there any zones where we really do want to try and protect that single family character, with the exception of allowing the accessory dwelling units?
Our C1 zone is basically just the old downtown, right? That's
Mhm.
it. Do we want to allow any of those multifamily housing types in the old part of Tenino?
I mean, I think
Is there a
historically,
reason that, I mean, I know that I've been up here and I was part of the reason it's like that, but I'm wondering now that we're sitting here, why would we really actually want that? I mean,
I think historically, as cities developed, there was a lot of mix in uses, and I had Reese bring. Thank you, Reese. The zoning map. It got a little cut off. Our plotter wasn't working well. But you can see it goes in some cases beyond just the main. Let me flip to I have the zoning map with here's the legend. So you can see it goes beyond just the immediate downtown.
so it's the blue too, that's the
Yeah,
historical overlay.
Yeah, that's the overlay that has the additional restrictions that would apply on top of this base zoning. But like,
this one is the parking lot that they just made right behind the sandstone. And this is like a downtown-y
It's like the
continuation of
landmark.
that building, right? I mean, basically, it's the same.
Yeah,
So,
so I
like-
mean, functionally, probably that's, you know, probably none of the lots that are fronted here are gonna change. Unlikely that these are gonna change. Who knows, maybe what's gonna happen over here, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's tough to say. But if you really wanna keep this as commercial or mixed use only, we can make those changes to the code requirements. Like, bottom floor commercial with apartments above, or something like that. We could make those changes later on.
Okay. Maybe we can later on talk about it more.
Yeah, or if we all like that approach, of really limiting the kinds of residential that would be in the C1 zone, then we can make some policy revisions to that effect to bring back for next time.
Yeah, I could see more storefront bottom and then apartments up top would be really nice.
Okay.
So keeping in mind that height limit that we talked about, I'm gonna go back to it. You know,
Yeah.
I'm gonna go back to it.
Yeah, let's do it.
So that was within that limit, we were talking about like a 2/1 or whatever that, so it was like 2 floors over a single commercial floor on the bottom.
Mhm.
So that was within the height limit, or is it like we can only get one?
It's 35 feet, so
Yeah,
in
35
theory
feet.
you can fit 10
Depends on
feet,
how
10 feet,
tall
10
the
feet.
ceilings are.
But then you have to,
Right.
But with the commercial in between, you typically have a lot more mechanical stuff going
Yeah.
on,
Yeah.
structural stuff, so it's like more like 14 feet
yeah.
and then about that.
And then 10 and 10 or something.
Yeah, and then you have to think about HVAC on top, so.
Yeah.
We would probably want to make
What
some.
big's going on?
Sorry. We would probably want to make some allowances in the code for projections of mechanical
mechanical
equipment,
stuff, yeah.
parapets, things
Mhm.
like that.
Okay.
So.
You can do that without increasing the overall height limit.
Yeah, you can allow a limited kind of stuff to project above that height limit. That's pretty common. You would just exempt those things or exempt them up to a certain height. Like people can have 6 feet for mechanical equipment only, or you can allow like an elevator penthouse, for example. Yeah, all of those kinds of things can be listed as an exemption to the height limitations without increasing the height limit overall.
So does the height limit basically end at the top of the parapet? And then anything can like go above it, like mechanical stuff, or say somebody does a rooftop deck up there, then that can be exempt from the actual building height itself.
Yeah, we could write it however you want. So, currently, let's say you've got your height limit that's measured from your grade to, some jurisdictions measure it to like a midway point on the roof that allows a little bit more variation in roof lines, or some people measure it right to the peak. Some people or some jurisdictions measure like for a flat roofed building to the actual roof and exempt the parapet. So it can be however we want to craft that language. We've got a lot of flexibility in how we want to apply really any of the dimensional standards. So I want to make sure, are we all in agreement that we're gonna really focus this C1 zone on first floor commercial, option to have residential above?
I like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
If we decide next time that we don't like it, we can scrap those policy changes, but we'll bring something back to talk about next time.
I'm gonna say this now, but we can push it towards the end. I just don't wanna forget about it. I'm talking about the city park and the fact that the park does not fall within the city limits and the potential discussion around that.
Yeah, this
It's in the
piece.
UGA right now.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
No.
It's this.
But the 60 acres that was just,
It's this.
This,
no, no.
I think it's
Yes,
this
it is.
one.
No, it's not. I've looked at GIS.
I got a request from the parks folks to add this piece in.
I think part of that is, maybe both of these are.
Okay.
But this is the new part also, and this is as well, and the cell tower is right here. And this
Okay.
is Creekside's property, and this is the dump road.
And we're gonna need to take this piece too.
Those are,
But there is,
we got those back in 2007.
Okay.
but there is a large portion that is not within the UGA or the city. limits.
Yes.
Yeah, so we're gonna add this. This is part of our discussion with Thurston County, but it's not residential, so it doesn't help us with our housing.
Yeah.
So we haven't really talked about it, but we're gonna ask to add that to the UGA, for parks purposes.
So what's this one?
That's part
That's
of the
the
new acreage also.
Yeah.
It's both those parcels.
Okay, it's both those parcels. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Yeah, because my thought is, one, there, technically the way a UGA is you're supposed to be able to like put systems towards that in the next 20 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, like extending your utilities or transportation infrastructure,
So
all
we have
the.
to bring it in and change the zoning to public, semi-public, is that what we have to do, or?
Yeah, so first step is to add it to the UGA in this update process, and then, assuming that you want these in your city, then you just annex them.
Yeah, and then that should also decrease like the cost that the city then sends to the county for like things, correct?
Yeah, I don't, I'm not sure what, because they're publicly owned, you know, there's not really improvements like a house or, you know, commercial structure on them. I'm not quite sure what the tax burden is on these, if there's much of anything, but yeah, you wouldn't tax yourself
Yeah.
if you annex them.
Probably still in forest land, right? And, right? And there's probably some kind of moratorium on them still from when they were logged last time, so I don't know if that affects your ability to change the use in some way. Cause they were logged back in 2008, 7, maybe 2007, I would say. Maybe that's moratorium's over now.
Yeah, I'll have to look into it. I don't know off the top of my head. Okay.
Is that challenging, any of that?
No, I don't think there's a problem using it for like recreational purposes, the same way that there would be a problem converting it to like a residential or commercial use.
Mm-hmm.
I will need to do some more research to be able to talk about it intelligently next time. But I'll look into it. Okay. Other questions or comments on infill, middle housing, any of that? Okay. All right, then we also did our non-residential capacity. We just talked through this. C1 is our historic downtown. The intention is to have some mixed use, primarily focused on retail, commercial, retail and services type of commercial. C2 that's your gateways and major intersections, typically auto-oriented, more likely that people will drive to those places. And then C3 is the transitional area with a greater mix of commercial and residential uses. This is how your code describes these right now. And then the I industrial district is for larger scale industrial, acknowledging that some limited amount of commercial might be more appropriate in that zone.
And that industrial is only right here, is that correct?
Yep.
It's like the cannabis store and the baker's towing,
Gotcha.
basically.
So we took a look at non-residential capacity. the net acreage is shown here. So C1, there's about 1.4 acres of vacant or underutilized land within the downtown, 0.2 acres of the gateway auto-oriented areas, and then 6.1 acres of vacant C3. About half of that actually is this guy.
I was about to say it's over there.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that one in a minute. And then about 3.6 acres on industrial. So Tenino zones its rights of way. We exclude those from our analysis. We follow the same type of process that we've talked about for residential, where we remove critical areas, we remove an assumption for infrastructure and an assumption for market factor. So this represents net developable land. So there is still some amount of capacity. We made some employment estimates based on density, and for non-residential density, we're typically talking about floor area ratio. And I brought a slide to talk about what that means a little bit. So this floor area ratio measures the gross floor area of a building compared to the lot. This graphic shows floor area ratio, or FAR of 1.0. So that means that a lot would have the total gross floor area equivalent to the size of that lot in a 1.0 FAR scenario. That floor area, that gross floor area, can be configured in many ways, but the gross floor area remains the same whether the lot is covered 100%, 50%, 25%, 10%. So when we talk about FARs, the higher intensity development has a higher FAR. We assumed for C1, C2 a 1.0 FAR, and for C3 and I a 0.75 FAR. Calculating out, and this is, these were based on, these assumptions for density in these zones were based on what's allowed in the code and what's typical for the kinds of uses that are allowed. And using that FAR and the developable acreage, we estimate an occupied square footage and use that to calculate the number of employees that could theoretically exist in these areas. That gives us a very rough estimate of about 760 potential jobs on the vacant and undeveloped land that's in your non-residential zones. So,
Potential.
potential, yes, it's all potential. I talked through this with Dan, and he and I are both in agreement that we think that what's currently zoned C1, C2, C3, and I has a pretty adequate capacity for the 20-year planning horizon. He strongly recommended taking a look at the ag park property and setting aside the wastewater treatment plant, rezoning the remainder of the ag park to allow for commercial development, like a C3 zoning designation, to help facilitate some additional, yes.
Given all the financing and how we got all the money for that?
I believe so. I mean, the intention is for it to develop with some commercial enterprises.
How would that work with the way it's going to be managed and all that? Isn't Harry Shea going to be managing this? Is that right?
The management shouldn't change. The management structure shouldn't change. The zoning designation really governs what uses can go on the property and what the dimensional standards are.
So it doesn't change anything about what's allowed to happen there or any of that stuff exactly, or it does?
It does, so it does change the allowable uses out there. So currently, right now, it's designated public, semi-public. Redesignating it to a commercial designation broadens the uses that are allowed.
But we want them to be secondary agricultural uses predominantly, so won't that just open it up to make it any industrial park anywhere?
I think,
Because it sounds like that would just open it up to make it just like, could be by the airport in Olympia or.
Can I ask a question with that? So I have two questions, but to directly go with his question, could we put an agricultural overlay on that? And the same idea that a historical overlay constricts what can go there and how it can be done?
yeah,
Could that go to C3 and then also have an agricultural overlay that then constricts it to businesses or commercial that directly relates to the already existing agricultural park?
yeah,
Well,
that's
what
one
would-
way to get at it.
What would you be able to do there? Why do I like your idea, but why would we do the rezoning to C3? What do they wanna do that they can't do right now? I mean, I guess is what I'm asking.
I don't know that this was driven by any specific request of anybody in or associated with the ag park. I think this is more Dan thinking ahead to the future and making a recommendation that provides more flexibility. Yeah, I don't think that there's anybody pushing for that. I think it's just a suggestion to consider.
All right.
I have another question.
Man, he sent me in cold on that one.
I have another question
Yeah.
about that. We just went through this whole process to change code to allow slaughtering on public, semi-public. Does that screw this whole thing up?
Potentially.
So again, I ask, why were we doing that?
Maybe we don't do it. Maybe the feedback is that's a terrible idea, and that's
I don't know if
okay.
it's a terrible idea, it just sounds like work for the sake of work, because nobody wants to do anything that's not already allowed there. We already changed the code to allow more things in the public, semi-public, which is what they wanted to do there. And now we wanna open it up to anything, any kind of business that anybody has, you know,
Well,
you'd be making pavers over there or something.
Well, public, semi-public has to be, my understanding, has to be like owned by the city.
The city
Or-
owns it.
Like, the city owns that entire
Yes, that's
space.
right, that's right.
Oh.
That's how we got all the money. That's why I don't understand why the state gave us all the money for infrastructure and stuff, and then we're just gonna turn it into a normal commercial park. It just seems kinda like all the people who get in there now are just gonna benefit from all the public money that got the infrastructure out there, and they're just gonna turn it into like every other industrial park that exists in 100 miles or.
So can I ask a clarifying question on that? You say that was there a requirement tied to the money?
That's why I was asking, I don't know.
Okay,
I
because
would
that would,
assume so, but, cause it was sold as
I would
a,
assume not, actually. It's,
well,
it
was
it
very
depends
sold
on,
to
yeah,
them.
Yeah, it's just-
it really depends on like
Yeah.
what pot of money they got it from,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, I think that's a good question probably for
But either way, like,
Yeah.
city council to
I
answer.
mean, the vision of the place is kind of tied to the city owning it and the EDC managing it and all that stuff. How does any of that stuff play out in a world where you can just do whatever you want over there?
Yeah, and that would be my concern as well. Because if you want to encourage an agricultural use of that, you really have to tighten it down, because ag is not going to have the same wherewithal to be able to pay for space and all of that kind
That
of
was
stuff.
the whole beauty part about the thing. It was
Yeah.
supposed to be encouraging local agricultural producers to have a place where they could stay in agriculture and they could get the benefit
Yeah.
of these group services. That was the concept originally. It's strayed from that slightly, but I don't want to see it like completely washed away.
unless that's what everybody wants, I guess, but I'm just worried about rezoning it and basically fundamentally changing what it is.
It opens up a can of worms that I don't think we want to address just yet.
Okay. I'll ask Dan a little bit more about what he's thinking here, and thank you for the feedback on that. I'll try and find out a little bit more, and if it's worth discussing again next time, then we can talk about it again.
We want to talk to the EDC too, like Aslan Mead, and
Yeah.
see what he says about that idea.
Okay.
Oh, I have another question.
Yeah.
Mime Acres, what would that be zoned?
It would be zoned probably SF if it were annexed. So in the UGA, it's still county, right? So it's whatever the current zoning is, it will stay that. If it were annexed, then it would very likely be zoned single family or single family on the west side and SFES on the east side, since that's where there were quite a lot of stream buffer areas, floodway stuff.
It would make up all of our higher end and medium deficiencies that we have in terms of housing, right?
Yeah, it would.
And in theory, it wouldn't change the look of the city as much as an expansion would of the other ways, because it's kind of tucked in there more.
Yeah, it wouldn't
in
change
my thoughts.
the look of the city much at all.
And all of these people in this area could walk to like the distillery and kombucha brewer and the like steak purveyor.
Yes, the dream. They could walk across the street to the Fish and Wildlife property over there.
Hiking
Amazing.
trails.
Put in some sidewalks all over town.
Anyway, so yes, in the short term, no change. But in the long term, assuming annexation, it would most likely fall within the single family residential, similar to the Hidden Meadows.
Because until it's annexed, it's rural residential 1 to 5.
Yes, yeah, unless the county's planning on changing things, which I will ask them about next week when we meet with them. Yeah, for now, there would be no changes to the zoning, the land use designation, anything like that would just be something that the city could take action to annex in the future.
There'd be no restriction on the property owners that own it now. They could do
For
everything they want to do now, they could do
Yeah,
after they're in the UGA.
Yeah, nothing changes.
For
No
all
more
intents
money
and
needs to change
purposes,
hands or anything.
absolutely nothing changes for them in terms of like
We need to make that
regulatory.
clear for
Yes.
everybody, I think.
And
Um,
we still report to the county for permitting purposes unless we annex them.
Correct, yeah.
Some cities have an agreement with the county that lets them issue permits in the UGA, but we wouldn't do that probably, right?
I mean, if you really wanted to, that's called or what I've seen it called is a co-management interlocal agreement that allows the city to assume planning and zoning permitting responsibilities. Not everything falls within that. So for example, the county still needs to make final decisions on like subdivisions. They still need to make final decisions on floodplain permits. So it becomes,
Do we get some of the tax revenue that the county would get for those if we're managing the zoning and stuff?
you can collect fees for the permits, but you don't get the tax revenue until it's within your jurisdiction, unless that's part of your agreement. If you're planning to take relatively speedy action to annex, it can make a lot of sense because it provides a little bit more consistency in the short term, like in terms of how development occurs, and it makes it a more seamless transition when it's annexed. But if you're not planning on a speedy annexation, I don't personally think that it's really worth pursuing.
Okay.
It adds some extra steps, and it can be really confusing for those property owners because most of what they need to do. They deal with the city. Sometimes they need to deal with the city and the county, and then there are some times when they only deal with the county, and it's just really not always clear to them
Yeah, it makes
where they
sense
need to talk to whom.
Wait, I was just curious.
Yeah.
That was an option.
Yeah, it is an option. I'm not sure that there would be a great amount of benefit if you're not actually planning to annex relatively soon.
Now I know, in that same kind of line of thought, I know that the county is working on joint code updates with Olympia and Lacey. What does that look like for Tenino?
That's a great question. They haven't asked us about anything, and I'm not sure. They may have a co-management ILA with one or more of those jurisdictions that would make that kind of joint code update project make more sense. But I can ask them about that at my meeting with them next week as well.
Is it just for like where Winco is?
I honestly don't know.
It was like that, where Winco is up in Martin Way, that's actually in the county, even though Lacey provides some services like water and stuff to that area.
Yeah, actually, I don't fully understand planning that much, so. Learn as you go.
Yep.
But yeah, I know that they're working on those currently, 'cause that's like part of their big tasks. I just don't know what that actually includes in it. So I was curious.
Okay. All right. Does anybody have any specific concerns about non-residential capacity? Does anybody need me to walk through the methodology again? Does anybody see issues with potential deficiencies that I didn't see?
I don't think so.
Okay. We did, so ignoring the first bullet, we did also hear some needs from the fire district about potentially
Oh,
potentially finding a new site for a fire station. So we do need to still check in with other agencies and figure out if there are any other like public, semi-public related redesignations that might be appropriate. I don't think at this point that there is a site that fire district is ready to move on. So
it might be of note to Topton School District.
okay.
So to what capacity or do we need to consider the fire district and the school? I mean, how would we address, if they were looking for a spot in town, then we would maybe rezone something public, semi-public for them to buy it, basically, or something they don't own already?
Yeah, if they had a property that they were working on acquiring, if they had like an opportunity.
Like actively?
Yeah, then we would probably take the opportunity to redesignate.
I see.
If not, no
see.
problem.
Just as a
You can do it,
courtesy.
yeah,
So we don't have to do it next time?
yeah,
I see, gotcha.
Or we just do a mid-year code adjustment.
yeah. You can do an amendment once a year. That includes amending your comp plan to make the land use designation appropriate, and then you can rezone the property, you know, whatever they end up choosing.
Right.
Yeah. I will say annexation is a little bit different. So like when we do bring these in to the city, they would be land use designated and zoned as part of the annexation. So they don't really count towards your annual comp plan update.
But we're not gonna annex these parcels, right? These are privately owned, I think.
Yeah,
That's not part of what we're talking about.
the only thing I've been asked to do so far is to add this property to the UGA.
No, okay.
So nobody's this is the first time I've spoken about even whether these should be annexed. And that's something that the city is gonna need to decide, and if they wanna annex, cool, have they annex them. If not, then they're gonna sit in the UGA for the time being, and they can still be used as a park. There's no problem with that either.
What's the advantage of annexing them? I mean, if you can just, because I know that this one's been in the UGA for a long time, maybe like 20 years at least, just sitting over there in the UGA.
Yeah, I mean,
Is there a reason to annex it? I mean,
you
except
have,
just to keep it clean?
you've got more control over the use and development of the property. So if you wanted to develop it with more park facilities, like, let's say you wanted to build an aquatic center or something like that, right? You have a little bit more control over the standards that apply to that.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I got it.
If you don't want to do
If you're not
anything
gonna
with
do
it,
anything
then it
with
doesn't really
makes
matter.
no difference,
Yeah.
but that's-
I also feel like in true technicality, when you say the city has blank amount of space for open recreation in it,
yes.
then you,
It's cleaner, obviously,
Yeah.
to,
Yeah.
shore up the lines.
Yeah, I mean, I think that controlling the property, whether it's in the city or not, still technically passes the like straight-faced
oh, sure, yeah.
test. When you're talking about how much acreage you have and who it serves and who you're serving with that acreage. But yeah, I mean, just in terms of controlling the future of the property, it's definitely neat and tidy to have it within the city. Okay. All right, and then other than what we've just talked about, we don't see the need for any other real changes to the non-residential stuff.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
You guys talked about these parcels here. I know that, I think the city owns some of that, and at least one, I think John Burden, the guy who owns the distillery, had thought about building something there. I don't know.
Is
I thought that was over here somewhere. No, it was right there.
where is the trestle? Right
This
here.
is right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, so if you go under the trestle, and then
Yeah.
on the right, there's that pest management place and that
Yeah.
lot, and then, but I think he may own this, and the city owns some of this
Yeah, I believe so.
also.
Well,
And
he just cleared this, I think.
I think his intent is, we may wanna talk to him, because I think his intent is to put some kind of, either his distillery or something, I'm not really sure, but.
Yeah, didn't he talk about like Airbnbs or something like that?
Talking about a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
Uh,
with the distillery, brewery, whatever.
Yeah, he was trying to get this, I think he was trying to get this, potentially use some of the city property for a parking lot or something, I'm not really sure, honestly,
Mm.
but.
Is that the Green Street
Yes,
that goes to Dale?
yes.
Segue, we're gonna talk about opportunity sites.
Oh my god, you're welcome.
We're gonna talk about opportunity sites. So the first one is, we talked about Tenino Estates last time. Given some of the concerns around potential displacement, the condition of the development currently, we're still strongly recommending that this be protected as affordable housing. We could consider a rezone so that if the property owner wants to do something different in the future, that it could accept more density, but not adopting any policies that would initiate any kind of redevelopment in the short term. However, I did want to point out that there are some other excellent opportunity sites that would not have the same concerns about displacement, the first of which is the vacant field. So this is, it's vacant. The piece that is within the city is 3.6 acres. It's zone C3 currently, which means using the same density assumption calculation that we did for Tenino Estates, it could accept up to 144 units, very likely going to be less. Also true for Tenino Estates, if that were to redevelop, very likely to be less than that. 40 units per acre I don't think is feasible with your current development, like dimensional standards. But for the purposes of all of our residential capacity calculations being consistent, we're using that for now. We would assume only, for this calculation, we would assume only residential. However, I do want to point out that it's got some real potential as kind of a stronger gateway to the community. It's right on Old Highway 99 for people coming in from that direction. It could be a really interesting mixed-use project, and the adjacent parcel is owned by the same person. It's currently not in the UGA. It does have some critical areas constraints, but it also, there's plenty of property that is not constrained, that could be added to the UGA potentially, now or in the future, and annexed in the event that somebody did want to move on redeveloping or developing this parcel.
Do we have to take some of West Tenino out of the UGA, or we don't have to do anything with it, even though it seems like some of the further west
You
pieces
don't,
are-
you don't have to do anything with it, and it's already annexed. Quite frankly,
just-
I've never done a de-annexation.
Oh yeah, I forgot it has.
Yeah, you don't get rid of the.
Yeah.
You may as well keep it.
De-annexation is allowed under certain conditions, but I just am not familiar with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just, for some reason, I was thinking it was just in the UGA, but no, it's not.
Yeah, it's.
It does make sense to add this bit though.
Because the other part would be rural residential 1 to 5, so it makes it nearly impossible for this landowner to actually develop their land.
Maybe if that part was in the UGA, that would sweeten the deal for him a little bit or something.
Yeah, maybe, or could be more attractive to an outside developer who might want to do something with the property. In the short term, this 3.6 acres is, for me, I think it's really interesting. I'm not quite sure why it's remained vacant for so long. I think it's a really cool piece of property. It's flat, it's vacant, and it's zoned for some really interesting uses. So I'd be interested in trying to see if we could adopt some policies that would maybe encourage that to redevelop. The other opportunity property is here on the corner of Lincoln and is this Hodgdon?
Isn't that one house gone already?
This is from 2022 aerial imagery. This is what's on the Thurston County map. But it's this one is some vacant structures on 3 parcels. It's total about half an acre. It's zoned multifamily already, using that same density calculation that we've been using for land capacity purposes. This could accept up to 20 units. Probably this would be more like 8 units, maybe 10 units, kind of given how development is happening in Tenino right now. But you know, this property could take advantage of municipal water and sewer. It's really close to the school and to downtown. It's already got sidewalks along the street frontage. It's got alley access.
Does it have sidewalks? I don't think so.
There, we were out.
I don't
I don't remember.
Am I crazy? I was just there and I thought I saw a sidewalk there. I thought
I know on some of those roads, like half of them do, then it will like cut off, and then the next block doesn't have them at all, and then also maybe they'll pick back up again. So
I noticed that it says in the comprehensive plan somewhere that we specifically do not want to put sidewalks everywhere. Did you see that? Have you seen that in there?
I don't remember.
It's in there somewhere. I don't remember exactly where. Like as a goal.
I think I remember we talked about that, we talked about the different type of sidewalk you could put there, just so more people can walk around town or bikes and kids and stuff.
There's a sidewalk there. I can see it.
Yeah, it's like,
Yeah.
I
You can
really
kinda
remember
see it
there
from
being
here.
a sidewalk.
But it might be the next block, but
Yeah, the one,
closer
Yeah.
to the schools where it drops off.
Yeah, like
Okay.
it's not a connected
Makes sense.
sidewalk.
We can call that.
okay.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
can
like
see it kind of.
this doesn't have a sidewalk.
It's
It
just-
doesn't
yeah.
wrap, it doesn't even go all the way over.
It's just
the
one
seawall.
property owner too, and he wants to develop it. He just
He
needs
does
some
Yeah.
help of
want
some
to
kind.
develop.
I guess.
It would be cool to have like that be a cottage.
I think he even mentioned that.
Yeah. I
Uh,
don't know.
a few years ago, we walked around with him, did like a walk around tour, and I think he said that was what he was interested in. So
Well, now's his chance.
yeah,
Anyway, so there are already some other properties that could have a lot more development on them. They don't result in displacement. There are already some conditions that lend themselves well to development, and so I'm hoping that we can adopt some policies and some development regulations that generate some activity in that direction for these kinds of
Or what does
properties.
that look like?
Some of what we're talking about now. So, for example, if this guy wants to do a cottage court situation, allowing that will open the door for that kind of development. We can certainly check in with these property owners and find out what some of the barriers are, just to see if that's something that makes sense for us to address
Yeah.
in our policies.
I think with this one, I think that's helpful, but I also think with this one, it might be worthwhile to see what their holdup is, if they actually want to develop it at all, or if it just happens to be zoned the way it is. And
Is it right here?
Yeah.
these,
it's definitely just zoned C3 because
Yeah.
we zoned it to C3. We didn't ask anybody when we did that.
yeah. And then,
Oh, this is
then with
on
this,
mixed.
like if annexing, or if annexing, well, UGA, and then annexing the rest of their property would lead them to something. I think that'd be also interesting.
Yeah.
Because I think part of it is also allowing people to do what they want in a responsible manner.
And
Okay.
C3 allows them probably the most possible flexibility that we can offer at this
It
point.
does, right now, it offers a huge amount of flexibility. Yeah,
But it would be interesting to see if there's something we can push them over the edge on. Like, that would be nice.
all right, then the last section is talking about anti-displacement. So there are some requirements that have been adopted in recent legislative sessions. HB 1220 was adopted in the 21-22
I think 2022.
legislative session. This is where we start having, or where we see the requirements for planning at all of the different income brackets. But this bill also requires that we identify and address policies that result in racially disparate impact and displacement. And we also look at areas of higher risk for displacement with the tools that we have available. Tenino doesn't really have a lot of or any areas that are at high risk for displacement, but we do
So,
need to consider
I know some
anti-displacement.
people that live in the Tenino Estates, and they say that the landowner has been raising that rent a lot, and so I know people have talked about already moving away from there, so
Mhm.
That's
that-
what I've heard. Is
that, yeah, they are at risk of not affording it, and these are families with like one income, multiple kids, or elderly people, so.
Yeah.
So I have a question on that then. If it's becoming less affordable, at what point do we look at this from a planning perspective and go, that's no longer affordable housing?
Good question.
I don't, well,
Because technically,
I
I mean,
brought up
technically we're
this-
saying it's protected because it's
Yeah.
affordable, right? And I
Yes.
think it is for the time being.
I don't think
Right.
so. And I'll tell you why.
Okay.
They're paying $800 a month
Yeah.
for the lot
Yep.
Yeah.
only. If
But-
you bought your house in there, let's say you got it for like $100,000, because that's how much the units are selling for, depending on which one,
It was cheaper than
Well,
800.
there's one currently for sale, I think for 160, and you're
Okay.
looking at
And
around
so then-
$1,000 just
Yeah,
for that.
then you
building.
get the 1,000 for the
800 for the
mortgage,
lot.
plus the
Yeah.
800.
Plus if there's any other fees and dues on top of that.
And so the townhomes across the street from me are renting for
2,000.
2,000,
Yeah.
but they include utilities.
And so, if that's true, and the utilities, are included over in Tenino Estates, then we're not talking about anything.
So then why are they classified as affordable right now?
Because the concept is that if you bought your house 10 years ago, then it's affordable because all you're doing is paying that piece of rent.
Gotcha. So
So
we're not
No.
looking forward. We're looking back.
Kind of, I
When
would
we're,
assume.
when we're classifying,
Yes.
we're looking back so far. Now we're looking back so far.
It
Because
doesn't
in the
make any
current
sense.
in the current market, it doesn't make any sense.
But I do want to point out there's
And they're
there's
not
a big
rent control
well, but
in any way.
they're not. But there is a big difference in the two projects that you're talking about. Tenino Estates is an ownership opportunity, and the townhouses across the street from you are rental only.
That's true.
That's what's true.
But I don't know that I would call it an ownership opportunity.
You are still paying land rent. You
It's
own
a
the building.
depreciating asset, if anything.
It is, and it's a stranded
And there's
asset
nothing you
because
can
you're
do to
not
make
hauling it off
not
anywhere.
depreciate, really. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, but it is ownership. It's not complete ownership the way that you would own a house fee simple, but it is ownership compared with a similar rental situation. So I do want to make that distinction.
that's true.
Anyway, so
But it's not building equity like a house.
it's not building equity the same way, certainly not.
So that's kind of like the reason you want to own something is because it's building equity, and if it's not, then it's just depreciating. And whereas you do own it and you can sell it and get out of it, it's not like if you hold on to it for 50 years, it's going to be worth more than when you bought it, right? Like a house might if you take care of it, potentially.
Well, and I think the
Fingers
big
crossed.
determination in the word affordable is like, if you live there now and you've lived there for a while, then in theory it's affordable to you because you bought your house when it was cheaper and you may pay $800 in land rent, but if you're paying a small amount because you bought your house a long time ago and it's cheap, so then overall your cost now is cheap. But I couldn't move in there and it be affordable.
Yes.
I think that's
And so for me,
That's the
it doesn't
weird
meet
thing
that
about it.
definition of affordable for that reason, because my house is an affordable house, not if I bought it today.
yeah. I think
Like everybody who bought their house 10 years ago is in the same boat as everybody who lives in Tenino Estates who's lived there for 15, 20 years.
but that's
It's my mortgage is affordable.
But that's the
I like
issue
it,
with
but-
displacement is you're moving the people who can afford it now
Yes.
into a market that they can no longer afford anything. That's why displacement's an issue.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that you're displacing the future person because the future person's paying market rate now, but it's that those people who entered at a lower market rate are now going to be forced into a higher market rate, where now you have to pay $2,000 for a townhome, where they're paying $800
But
for
the
a land.
landlord is able to raise the cost
Yeah.
of the rent whenever they feel like it's
But their
not
house
in
cost
any way
But their
like
house
a
cost
low
is
income
set.
housing development with like some kind of rent controls or anything like that.
But that's also true of those townhomes that are rentals, right? Like every year, your rent is going to increase by some ungodly
Right.
amount.
Well, those aren't affordable. That's not what we're talking about as affordable. And I'm saying, are these affordable? I mean, they are kind of, as you say, for the people who've lived there for a while, but not new people moving in there.
I think
I don't
that
know.
would fall underneath the higher risk of displacement, to be honest.
Yes, I do think that that's true, but I don't think that rezoning the whole thing multifamily, and I guess that's why we're talking about the displacement thing. We don't want to encourage anybody to be displaced, but just the act of zoning something that's zoned multifamily and single family now to all multifamily, I don't really see how that changes anything on the equation. Like the landlord can still do whatever they want. People who are long-time renters there can do whatever they want until the landlord raises the rent above what they can afford at some point in the future. And then I guess who knows what will happen at that point. But we don't have any control over it as a city. Like
We don't. And making that kind of zoning change may make it more attractive to a potential developer who might want to purchase it and redevelop it as
Maybe.
something. I don't know exactly how much more attractive, right? Like there's a whole spectrum, and
We have that, but the
Interventions
vacant
with
lots
the-
right next
right.
door, like if you had your choice, and you had to deal with paying for the displacement that you're gonna do by redeveloping this whole thing for like modern, for-profit, like multifamily, or you could build on this empty lot right next to it. I mean, somebody's gonna build there first, I would assume, but
probably,
I mean,
yeah.
it would be easier anyways.
And likely even in the event that this were rezoned multifamily, because you can still do some multifamily stuff in the C3 zone very easily. And you also have the option to add commercial, which separately generates income. So, you know, maybe considering the two, the vacant field will redevelop first, even if we did make some zoning changes to Tenino Estates.
All right.
Okay, and then just continuing the topic, manufactured home communities. So there have also been some separate protections for manufactured home communities that were adopted recently. So landlords do have to provide the opportunity for current residents to collectively try to purchase that community, and they also need to provide a very significant amount of notice of their intent to close or sell.
2 years.
Does 2 years, and you may not know this, but does 2 years mean, like, if the current owner of that land says in 2 years you have to move, that's pretty normal. That's easily defined. But like, if I went in and bought it tomorrow and I said, all right, I bought it, now I want to do something completely different, is that 2 years applied to me, or is that 2 years only applied to the current landlord that has the agreement?
Is it a change in use?
I-
that says 2 years?
I
believe so.
think
I think
it,
it's just selling.
yeah, I think it's just the sale. Well, no, because it says close or sell. So it might actually apply to both, the sale and then the closure and change in use. But I would need to go back and read the very specific language in the bill.
I believe so. I'm cursorily aware of this because this is something that I've been aware of in the last year. So for these communities, they have to be given that notice because the community could put up a competitive offer. There are certain organizations that will help them purchase the property and set up their own management organization. And so they have to be given a ample amount of time to be able to organize, go out, get a loan, and then competitively bid, as far as, you know, the ability to, you know, because the thing is people are coming from California, right? And they're looking at mobile home communities in Washington, and they're going, hey, this is a really great investment opportunity because I can buy it, lot rents are $400, I can put it up to $800 this year because there's no protections, obviously. And I can make my money back in 5 years, and then I've got nothing but just a money-making asset on my hands, right? And so I think the intent of this was to give people time so that they could potentially own it for themselves
Yeah.
as a community.
I will say this also is kind of a strong disincentive for redeveloping.
That's what I was
these
just gonna say.
spaces.
So like, the current owner has to wait 2 years, you know, to sell their property.
Does sound crazy.
Yep.
What happens if they need a surgery or something? They can get some money going. Just,
I guess file
tough
a
nookies.
whatever, get whatever a HELOC is for this.
Oh.
But yeah, it is a pretty strong disincentive
Yes.
for redevelopment just
I
because
know
of
there
the
are a lot of
time.
places up north where the communities are buying, similar to what you're saying, like some kind of association of mobile home owners or something, some kind of nationwide company helps the community members buy it.
Mm-hmm.
that does happen, so.
Okay, and then I am going to present a selection of potential anti-displacement actions or policies that we could consider. These are recommended by the Department of Commerce. There may be actions that other communities are taking. They're just for consideration. I'm not specifically recommending any of them. They're just some food for thought as we're talking about anti-displacement. So the first one is creating a specific manufactured home park or manufactured home community zone that is specifically written to protect that space and prevent it from redeveloping. A tenant opportunity to purchase ordinance, which limits off-market sales of manufactured home communities and apartment buildings. That off-market sale is kind of like that's intended to skirt some of this requirement. If it's like a direct sell versus put on the market, then there's not really that same like competitive process to purchase. This related to this would be also potentially right of first refusal, where the tenants are given the opportunity to purchase before it gets put on the market. Commerce also offers a relocation assistance program. So in the event that somebody is displaced, then there is some cash assistance available to help relocate. You can see from the values here that this isn't.
It's a lot.
It's
for 55 units, right? That's what
it's a lot, but it's not collective, right? It's for the individual. And if you're thinking about like a down payment somewhere else, this doesn't necessarily go very far.
I mean, it's not a lot. It's kind of a deterrent. That's all I meant. Because the developer has to pay that. Is that?
This is cash assistance from the state for people being moved out of their units.
I see. The state pays that.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
And this is to relocate the unit, right, Reese?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
You have to have somewhere to.
Or
You have
demolish
to,
it.
yeah, you gotta move it somewhere. Right, which can be really hard depending on the age of the unit and how it was installed. So it may or may not even really be helpful in all situations.
So how often does a family qualify for like the cash assistance if moving? Like say they are relocated somewhere else, but then that price gets jacked up. Now they have to relocate again. Does the state help them just one time? Is that all they qualify for?
I'm not sure.
Question.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Do you recall offhand?
I'm not aware. I wouldn't imagine that it would be like a one and done situation, because I think the intent is to avoid conflicts related to having to abandon your manufactured home after no longer being able to afford that rent initially.
Some other actions that have other places have used is partnering with a community land trust. In this case, a non-governmental organization, some kind of nonprofit typically, would acquire land and or housing units and rely on some financial assistance from the city to operate those in perpetuity as low-income, deed-restricted, affordable housing. Inclusionary zoning, which is, I think we talked about this last time, requiring some amount of affordable housing to be provided in new developments that have multiple units. So like if somebody built a Hidden Meadows, for example, some numbers, typically small, like maybe one, maybe 2 units would be required to be like a deed restricted affordable unit. In an apartment building, a couple of units would be required to be rented out at an affordable level. Other financial assistance, so for example, direct housing assistance for people who need to make rent, utility assistance for people that are having trouble paying the bills, mortgage assistance to address threats of foreclosure. And those are often just direct financial payments to those homeowners or renters. And then affordability incentives that are adopted into your development code. We've also talked a little bit about this. So this would be offering a height bonus or more units per lot in exchange for providing some number of affordable units, reducing on-site parking requirements, reducing certain amounts of taxes or fees associated with development, connection charges, those kinds of things. Streamlined permitting. There are many different options that could be used as an affordability incentive that can be more or less successful when used alone or in combination with multiple incentives or other kinds of inclusionary zoning.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
How many of these options, and not like number wise, but like how many of these are actually something that we can include into the comp plan, and how many of these are like the council would need to make their own decisions?
I mean, you can make whatever recommendations you like. I think probably the ones that are going to be most interesting to the city council would be potentially the inclusionary zoning that puts a lot more of the onus on the developer, but it does provide a disincentive for development, and potentially some package of incentives that can be used independently or in combination. I think that there's an active community land trust in Thurston County, but I don't know exactly what they're doing here, like in the immediate Tenino area. But similar with community land trusts, like working with an affordable housing developer to do kind of like a partnership to use city-owned land for affordable housing that's deed restricted. That could be that's something that the mayor has mentioned on occasion. So that might be something that's also interesting, and the policy for that would look something like leverage city assets to partner with an affordable housing developer to provide more opportunities or something.
Gotcha.
Something like that.
That makes sense. I have a follow-up question to that.
Mm-hmm.
So like, is that something that we should like reach out to like Habitat for Humanity or like First Homes, or there's one other that basically like either is building or rehabbing houses in Thurston County to like see what would be attractive for them to come into Tenino?
Yeah, so I think we can do some policy work to set the stage, but when we're talking about implementation of those policies, that's when that kind of conversation will be really helpful. So like, what direct actions does the city need to take to attract those developers
Gotcha.
to do work here?
So we say like the city should work with a nonprofit and leverage city tools or whatever, and then the actual implementation would be the next step after.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
like, hey, Habitat for Humanity, we've got this property, we really want some affordable housing. Is this something that you're interested in? If not, what's the problem? If yes, how can we, what do you need from us to make this happen?
Gotcha, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it might be something like, oh, well, we need more, like we would need to provide more units, right? Like we need more property, or we need financing in this amount or whatever, and then you can decide from there what to do with that information.
Gotcha. Okay. I have one more question, sorry. With streamlined permitting, so like Hidden Meadows, all of those houses look the exact same. Are they able to bring you in, this is what all 8 houses is going to look like, and have that approved, or do they need to come in and say, house 1 will look like this, and then make 8 copies, and then all of those 8 copies are approved?
So streamlined permitting can take a lot of different forms. So that could mean expediting permits. That could mean removing some of the land use entitlement work before you get to construction permits. That could mean using a pre-approved plan set like you're talking about. And the pre-approved plan set, so that means that the architectural plans for that house they're valid, right? There's still some site-specific review work that needs to happen for like the foundation, but once that's a much smaller cost, right? To review only that piece for each site. with the rest of the building being pre-approved. It ends up being cheaper. Typically, this is more of a drop in the bucket, with the exception of some of the very expensive entitlement processes, like if an environmental impact statement were required. Those things can be outrageously expensive for all of the special studies. So streamlined permitting I wouldn't say that this is a problem solver. I would say it's helpful, but likely isn't going to tip the scales one way or another.
Gotcha.
Unless there are some other incentives that support it.
Gotcha.
And that's it. That's all I have for tonight. So I think in terms of what I need from you to come back with initial policy recommendations, I think I've got everything I need. So thank you for the input and discussion.
Nice.
The survey, when is that happening?
Yes, thank you for the reminder. I had meant to include an update. We have the survey written, and I will have a link sent out for you all to do a test run and give some feedback on, and hopefully we can go live soon.
I was just thinking because Oregon Trail Days is coming up, so that might be a great space to say, hey, we're doing this, take the survey.
Yes, yeah.
Along with like the pool being opened and having those gatherings in the summer.
Yeah, maybe we can post like a flyer and a QR code, and all of the parents who are tired of watching their kid jump off the diving board for the 400th time.
Spice it up. But seriously, they might. Might do it, so that's a good idea.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I'll get the link sent over. I'll ask for it to be sent out for review. Obviously, to respond individually back to the city instead of reply to all for open public meetings purposes. Okay. Thanks, team.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks. All right, any other announcements? Anybody want to say anything? No?
I don't think so.
All right, meeting adjourned.